I'm delighted that today at QTC we have Rory and Steve McAlpine from Providence Church in Perth in WA. It's good to have you here, guys.
Very good to be here.
They've been here all week teaching an MA unit on mission and ministry in a secular age. Is that close enough?
Close enough.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, ballpark.
I haven't been able to sit in for all 5 days, nor have most people. Take us to the executive summary. What different, all this reading and thinking you've been doing about secular age. Presumably this afternoon you're going to give some bullet point takeaways for the guys who are there.
Silver bullets.
Silver bullets? Yeah. What difference does it make to ministry and mission on the ground for you guys? And feel free to pontificate, for all of Australia, but particularly how has what you've done and read and thought about shaped the way in which you do ministry in church?
Well, I guess the title is the giveaway. So we're thinking about a secular age and the mission and ministry, which we talked about. But by mission, we mean reaching the lost with Jesus, and by ministry, we mean building people up in the knowledge and love of God. So we've used kind of pretentious words of mission and formation, but which we just mean evangelism and discipleship.
Yep.
And that's the constant that we want to see. The biblical Jesus, all of Jesus known by the biblical Jesus known and followed faithfully. So the secular age bit is the variable.
Yep.
And the way we talked about that this week is that in the last 500 years, we went from a world where it was almost impossible not to believe in God to fast forward to 2019, and it's completely plausible to not believe in God. Yep. Even we who are Christians could imagine the non-Christian version of us in a way that would have been maybe hard. Yep. And then I guess in the last decade, you've had this huge collapse in Australia, a lot of the West, of what you'd think of as nominal Christianity.
Yep.
So a dramatic way to put that is between 2011 and now, 950,000 people in Australia who said they were Christian in 2011 said that they're out in 2016. Now the important thing there is that those guys, those 950,000 people, 5 years ago, they weren't in our churches singing praises to Jesus and reaching their friends and earnestly bringing their sins to the Lord. What they were doing is ticking a thing that said, "What are we, honey? We're C of E, or is that? I think it's called Anglican now." And in 5 years, they've been emboldened to say, "Do you know what? I'm nothing. I can live a completely plausible life without having to go through this thing." Now, we all knew that because we knew that ticking the box doesn't mean that you know the Lord. But it does change our situation in that we now find ourselves aware that we're a minority in a way that we probably did know, but it's a more acute thing. And we live in a situation where one of the lines we've used this week is that every Christian goes to two churches. They go to their Sunday church and they go to the world's church. And both places are heavily forming us to be one of two things. So we're really trying to think, how do we reach people who say, "Do you know what, I'm not anything," and how do we form people who have signed up with Team Jesus where there's this very powerful alternative discipleship program going on.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the thing for me is the cognitive dissonance of moving from perhaps we were wearing the white hat and suddenly you're wearing the black hat, and in Falling Down, the movie with Michael Douglas, he's standing on, he's wreaked havoc, righteously so, he thought, and then at the end, when he's standing on the pier at the end with nowhere to go, his back's against near the sea, and the police are pointing a gun at him, and he says, "You mean I'm the bad guy?" And, how did that happen? And I think it's that cognitive dissonance we're experiencing with Christians, that they're going, well, we moved from a place where we were kind of seen as the people who were on the right side, and you guys really got to get on board with us, and we were starting the do-gooders, a bit lame in Australia, a bit more lame than other places, Christians a bit lame, to suddenly it swung round, and suddenly I feel like the parent, we were partnering with the world for a while, we're all in this together, and now the world's kind of saying, actually, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. And the bit of ice we were standing on got smaller and smaller and smaller, and we feel like we're sort of floating along going, well, are we going to sink on this one? So I think it's that emotional space where you see, is it anger, is it resignation, is it keep your head down? I think in ministry, as people come to church, we're going, I'm meeting all those kind of people. what just happened, and how do we deal with it? They feel like rabbits in the headlights.
So, where do we go from here? As we're trapped in the headlights.
That is the key question, isn't it?
I think a big thing is to not panic. Because Jesus is Lord, and the worst way to commend the lordship of Jesus is to act like he isn't, and so he is, and he's claiming his people, and he's risen from the dead, and he's conquered sin and death and Satan, and so we need to live in that confidence and not enter into the anxiety of being aware that we're a bit more precarious and a bit more kind of moved from Ned Flanders to the kind of the evil, So I think number one is to not panic, and that's got to be grounded in the truth of God and what He's done in Jesus. And I think the way I've understood it later, tell me if this is your experience, but I feel like the crisis, and even that word I don't really want to use, but the difficulty we face is more of a discipleship thing than a evangelism thing. So I think actually, in many ways, ticking Anglican was kind of or Presbyterian or whatever, was a bit of a hindrance to evangelism. Whereas I'm seeing right across Australia, there's a freshness. I think the secular system isn't actually working or delivering very well. So I don't think you have to look and think, man, it's delivering goods and technology, and it's delivering pleasure but not happiness. And it's absolutely tanking at the level of meaning. People are very and at purpose and
anxiety,
huge anxiety levels and stuff like that. So I don't think look out there and think, oh, that they're nailing it. There's a huge need there, and a freshness to the gospel that I think the tricky area is with our people to think, what is it to be formed in Jesus? And I think there is a growing sense that we need to think, what does it look like to be someone who is living for Jesus and formed by Him, and recognizing that is a multi-pronged approach is needed. So we need the best possible teaching, we need the best possible preaching, and preaching is a large part of what I do, but we also need the one-to-one work, and I think the kind of to use kind of an old-fashioned word, the kind of church services where we're singing these songs and being led through a process that itself reflects the gospel. So that one of our little things for the Sunday service is, if the preacher got hit by a bus and you missed the sermon, would you still get the gospel?
And I guess if you're saying what's the silver bullet, it would be, well, actually there aren't. There's no silver bullet, because you go and maybe it's what you think the crisis is. That's where your silver bullet's coming from. So you can go to the last 15 years, every second book in a Christian bookshop has the word church at the end of it, because they're saying, what are we supposed to do at this time? And you can have books that say virtually the opposite on the same shelf. And so for me, it's about how can I, over time, thin that down a little bit so the peaks don't look so high, but what does the next 20 to 30 years look like, not the next 6 months for us as a church?
That's really helpful.
And speaking at a church here in Brisbane the other day of young people in their 20s, I said, part of your discipleship might be that your teenagers get to reach the age of 18 together. What would it mean for you all to be here, or a bulk of you, for 15 to 20 years? Because that would actually do something and say something beyond what the next 6 months could actually do.
No, I think it's interesting, because I do think it's not an obstacle to evangelism, but one of the things we've realised is that the attractional model that we've been using by default, we've all wanted to do evangelism, but actually the model is you try to do church in such a way that when word gets out that it's not bad, then people will come. And I think that works when people have experienced bad church. So we're kind of broadly the same age. Sorry, Rory, I pulled you up a little bit. But there's a sense in which people in our generation, it was very hard to escape church. In the various places we grew up. So you at least had, you had some contact with it. It might have been dull, but that did set you up 15, 20 years later. That if someone came and said, look, we're going to this new church, it's it's completely different. And it's kind of, ordinary.
Yeah.
People go, whoa,
Yeah.
I'll go for that. Whereas now, one of the things I've noticed even with my friends is that they're so distant from church that they really don't have an opinion in any, they have a general opinion that Christianity's sort of finished or but they don't have any personal animus. So therefore,
that's exciting in one sense, because there is no personal animus. But it's interesting that the level of knowledge is so low that I read in a New Zealand newspaper that the New Zealand Prime Minister, because she'd been in Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon, she was well placed to discuss Christian theology.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never picked the New Zealand Prime Minister who left at the age of 20 the Mormon Church to be the spokesperson for Christian theology.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was said, with no sense of irony, because that's where else are you going for your information on these things?
Which I think that situation does. I think it means that there's a freshness in evangelism, and there's probably therefore a patience that the process that leads to someone thinking, they're settled in the Lord. Maybe that's 3 to 5 years rather than 6 to 12 months or whatever. And so we need to have processes that acknowledge that. And the line I sometimes use is to say on that that we need to move from attractional churches to hospitable churches. Because attractional sort of surveys the area and says, what would you want in the church that you don't go to but might?
Yeah.
Whereas hospitable is more like, if I come around to your place for dinner, I don't want you guys to suddenly not do what you do. I want you to do what you do, but just explain to me where to put the knife and what time dinner is. Yeah. And I think that gives us a great freedom for church to be church and to think, this is the sermon and this participate here and as much as or as little as you is possible. I think that's it's an exciting moment to not have to second guess people and to just exercise that hospitality that the gospel itself kind of requires of us.
So to put it crassly, I think it's fair to say that sort of over the last kind of 30 or 40 years that as Australian evangelicals we've dropped a lot of things from church.
Yes.
Are you suggesting
you
it might be good to put some things back in again, and how do you if you're doing that, how do you do that?
My experience, this is the thing, I guess to teach a unit on this is fine, but to just teach a unit in it without having to put things into practice, that's a luxury we can't afford and you don't need. So we've made plenty of mistakes, I think, over the years, but my experience of people coming in from churches that had dropped all those practices was the first time that we put those practices into place. It was like trying to get your kids to eat an exotic food that they'll love eventually, but you can't tell them that they're going to love. And the first time they do it, they spit it out. And it's almost like, hold your nerve. Hold your nerve. And sometimes it feels like you're having to hold it longer. But over time, you start to see, these things are starting to create different pathways in people's lives. The neural pathway thing almost. That it's creating those reflexive responses in people that you want to see over a period of time. And you just can't fast track those. There's no way of doing that, and it feels like we didn't get into this in a short space of time, so we probably won't get out of it in a short space of time, I think.
Just one more thing. Any suggestions, kind of models for engaging with the world, with the wider kind of social political discussion? I mean, I know it's something that both of you do, but especially Steve particularly.
I'm going to let you reference this because I think Rory does it well, and in a much more winsome way than some might I tap into my Northern Irish to do it. I kind of think one of the things I've highlighted is I highlight what I call dissonance as a Christian. Not to say, in other words, we're not saying we're against everything you're against, but I've pulled back a little bit from saying we're all in this together about human flourishing, because we no longer have the same telos or goal for what human flourishing is. And I think, how can you be angular without being angry? How can you play hard to get instead of hard to want? Which is something you should always learn as you're growing up, especially as a 20-year-old male. But how do you play slightly hard to get that leaves a little room for, that is actually, if that is slightly different to how I live my life in 35 different ways, every time I ask them something, just a little bit different on me on this, over time that leads to a very different end. And I think that's the long game for me.
Yep.
I think three little gaps I'm constantly aware of, and this comes out of some of the stuff we've been reading this week. I think the secular age is really weak on human agency. So what is the meaning of my decisions and what I'm doing? And materialism just is like, well, they're just neurons, and they're just things in your head. It's all determined. Yep. And I think the Bible powerfully addresses an intuition that most people in our society share, that actually this is consequential, that I'm making decisions doing things. Yep. I think beauty, that our secular world can have all this beauty. It doesn't know what to do with it because it doesn't point to anyone. It's just these weird synapses in my head, and I think we can say something better than that. And I think morality. So I think the average, if you get past the gatekeepers, there's this fierce conversation happening in the intelligentsia, and if you get past them, I think the vast majority of Australians are really open to a thing that will say, I can really, here is a God and a account of the world that I can make better sense of morality and of human decisions and of the things that we experience when we have a child or see a sunset. I think they're very powerful ends for the gospel.
Fantastic. Listen, guys, it's been great to have you here. Better let you have your lunch before you go back and finish off this afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.